Good evening. My name is Vikas Pota. We use this opportunity to speak to friends from all around the world on various subjects that I think we ought to be discussing. Today, as you will know, is International Women's Day, and I thought that we should take the opportunity to speak about girls' education, but not just from a development basis, which we often do. And the statistics are quite mind-numbing when you think about it, right? So I remember reading a BBC report saying that it'll be the year something like 2082 before every girl in Africa is in a school. And obviously the pandemic has come along and really jeopardized any progress that has been made. And actually one of the things that we learn as a result of the pandemic is if there's one group of students or learners that are at greater risk, it's girls not returning to school. And all the progress that we had made in the world slips away. And so I often think in terms of, well, it's not just from a development perspective, but given girls' education as a whole, and the importance for focusing on equality, focus on what's right and justice. What are the things that we need to be thinking of when we have girls in our classrooms the world over, whether you're in the rich world or not? And so I thought that it'd be useful to bring forward and bring someone that I've gotten to know recently to talk about this subject. And so I'm pleased that Dr. Meera Viswanathan, who is a lifelong educator and scholar, who holds various degrees from Stanford, but was born in Madras or Chennai in India and emigrated at the age of 5 to Los Angeles in the US. I thought I'd bring Meera on to talk to us. But before I invite her fully, I want to tell you a little bit about her. So Meera is the head of a school in the US called the Ethel Walker School. And she, prior to doing this, she joined Brown University as a Japan Foundation Postdoctoral Fellow in the Comparative Literature and East Asian Studies departments. Subsequently, she became an assistant professor and was promoted with tenure. And Meera, and this is very interesting, Meera, who is fluent in 7 languages, including French, German, Latin, Classical Greek, Old English, and Old Norse, received several National Endowment for the Humanities grants and awards while at Brown. Meera and her husband, who also is an educator and a head of school in the US, was asked by King Abdullah II of Jordan to establish King's Academy, which was the Middle East's first co-educational college, a preparatory boarding school with financial aid, which opened in 2007. Meera served as the school's principal architect of the curriculum and dean of faculty, and His Highness King Abdullah II personally awarded Meera the King Hussein Medal, which is Jordan's highest honor for her endeavors. And Meera, I mean, to say that I am in awe would be an understatement. So welcome to this conversation.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Meera, can you tell us a little bit about your school to start with, and tell us the context? And I've obviously, we have mutual friends, and I have looked at your website, and of course, and I've heard about your work. And so I would love for those that are watching either on any of the social media channels, or today, by the way, is the first time you're actually being hosted on Clubhouse, which is a new app, where we're streaming into as well. So Meera, tell us about your school, the Ethel Walker School.
I'd be delighted to do that. The Ethel Walker School was founded in 1911. We're in our 110th year as an all-girls school, both boarding and day today. It consists of about 250 girls from the 6th grade to the 12th grade, all of whom will be attending college, and all of whom have a diverse array of interests, a rather intersectional profile in which girls are simultaneously scholars and athletes and artists and creators. And our mantra here is as thinkers and doers, and they certainly are.
And so, Meera, what sets a good education for a girl apart from the not so good?
What brought me to the Ethel Walker School was the realization in my college classes that every year in the first semester of classes, I could look at the female students in my course, and after about a week of listening to them, I would know with about 90% accuracy which of my female students had gone to an all-girls school and which had attended co-ed schools. And it was the demeanor, their comfort in their skin, their ability to speak without qualification or apology, their ability to persist in argument. And this struck me as extraordinary that in this day and age, that an all-girls education was not, as I had previously thought, a kind of fossil relic of the past, but in fact, it has persuaded me that it is the cutting edge for girls' education today.
And so, when as the father of two daughters, right, and as we're invested in this on a personal basis, the question that really goes on is, we hear about so many difficulties that girls have as they progress through life, and their formative years, which I include being at school, are so important. How do we prepare young girls for that future, right? I mean, today, and not to be too topical, I look at the famous interview that took place in America last night, that is playing out today and is going to be broadcast on our screens today at 7:00 in the UK, about Meghan Markle and Harry. And I often think in terms of the kinds of accusations and allegations being made and what they point out really strike me as really unjust and unfair to girls. And this is, coming from a very privileged context perspective. Tell me, how do we prepare girls for a future where we live in such an unjust world?
Well, and girls, it's not just our preparation, it's girls achieving that. And I think the first thing to think about is development. And what happens to a girl between the ages of 13 and 18 is absolutely crucial. And I use myself as an example. Until the age of 12 or so, I was garrulous, funny, and loud, and content with myself. And hitting puberty and then being in a co-ed situation, I found that I began to retreat to the margins. And this is about that broad spectrum of behavior we refer to as male development and female development, which are just different. There's no culpability. It's simply a difference. And as males achieve puberty, they push out hormonally. There's a kind of excess. Girls who've already, by the age of 12 or 13, learned fundamental things like self-control, discipline, reciprocity, know that when somebody takes a step forward, you take a step back. But ideally, as in a dance, it's reciprocal. And what happens is it ends up not being reciprocal. And so girls end up pushed to the margins, and we find that voices are lost. So I think the key thing, first of all, is to ensure an environment where it's not simply about who can be loudest or most aggressive, but the quality of what is happening. And I think that preservation of girls' voices is the first key thing. The second key thing is how to disrupt the gendered mindsets. If you think about girls, and you ask most girls, I would say, what is it they fear most? This is true for some boys too, so I don't at all mean to be dualistic or a kind of hard binary, because we recognize that spectrum of behavior. But most girls will tell you it's the fear of shame and public humiliation that keeps them flying below the radar. And keeps them from soaring sometimes is that notion that if they achieve one day, they will be expected to produce, and the pressure is too great. And so the key is, how do we introduce girls to the concept that failure is not the opportunity for public humiliation. Failure is simply a stage of learning. And so our goal here is to create a place, because we want our girls to learn a great deal. So how do we make it possible for them to fail regularly? Because it's only through failure that we progress.
I mean, so the question that we go to is, what superpowers do girls need for the future? And what is the role of a school in them finding these superpowers or developing these superpowers? I would love to ask you, in terms of, there are three things that we need to think about when it comes to girls and developing girls and the right competencies as girls, regardless of whether you're in a girls' school or a co-ed school. Can you take us through that in terms of what you think the future is?
Sure. Well, it's funny you asked that question, because when I was being interviewed for this position, head of school, the student leadership confronted me with the question about what superpower would I want as a head of school. And I have to say that in all my many years, I'd answered many questions. Never had I had to answer that one. And as I've deliberated on it, it struck me very quickly there was one superpower that I was absolutely fervid about girls not having. And invariably, when we read about superheroes, we hear about the cloak of invisibility as a highly desirable object. And I would argue that this is what girls and women have been saddled with for much of human history. That is that cloak of invisibility that is not volitional, but simply precludes them from being seen or heard. So what I'd like to do is discard that cloak of invisibility. But in terms of the superpower, the answer I finally came up with was the power of flight. It's the notion that girls should aspire to soar. And of course, soaring takes great courage. It takes that willingness to be able to rise above and recognize that you may crash land, but it doesn't preclude you from picking yourself up and soaring again. And so what I would say is that power to soar and resilience to continue soaring.
And so how does one develop that? So, the T4 community comprises a humongous amount of teachers from around the world. And the question is, in terms of, there's no objection to anything you've said, but how do you do it?
Exactly. And first of all, what you need is charismatic teachers. Charismatic teachers, every great teacher has charisma. It comes in many, many different forms, but it's the ability to engage students and to have them follow you. And so in addition to personal passion for education and extraordinary competence in their subject, I always look for charisma. So you need charismatic teachers, and then guess what you need? You need stressful times. So bingo, here we are in a perfect moment to teach resilience. Resilience is one of those topics. You can talk about it, you can analyze it, you can preach about it, but you cannot learn resilience except in difficult times. And so here's our ready-made opportunity. And resilience is the ability to continue and to endure despite hardships. And it's so easy to give up. And again, failure is simply giving up too soon. So what we're trying to teach in resilience is that ability to find creative ways to keep moving forward with that momentum. And it's that charismatic teacher-student relationship that helps propel that notion.
And so in many parts of the world, Meera, you don't have the luxury that perhaps we do in high-income countries of having a relatively moderate-sized classrooms, right, with students. If I look at in the UK, 25, maybe 30 in a classroom, but when you have 50, 60, 70, 100 in a classroom, how do you do that?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that's an advantage in working with girls is the ability to collaborate. And as long as we think of education as a solo endeavor and a zero-sum game, we find ourselves caught up in that question of who is going to win, who is going to lose, who's going to succeed, who's going to fail. One of the interesting things about girls, and I had mentioned, I think earlier in a prior conversation, that two professors, Professor Anita Woolley of Carnegie Mellon University and Professor Thomas Malone of MIT, the Sloan School, were studying group intelligence because they realized that most problems today are so complex, they require a team to solve it. And their interest was in what makes one team outperform another. How do we know how to teach this very important skill of team problem solving? And they tested various variables, I think including what you studied and how many degrees did you have, what age you were, all of that. None of those variables seemed to be significant in explaining why one team outperformed another, except one variable. And that variable was the presence of one or more women on that team. It's interesting, and their research since 2011 in that Harvard Business Review article has developed considerably. But it's a fascinating question. What is it about collaboration and women's operation, whether it's nature, nurture, epigenetic, who knows, or combination. But in any case, clearly collaboration is a moment that women seem to intuit um, uh, based on what we're observing anecdotally. And so one of our questions is, how do we teach this collaboration? That in fact, particularly when we take an economic model of limited resources and that rational allocation of them, this is the way, to use a biblical metaphor, the fish and loaves moment, right? How do we feed thousands, the masses, with just a limited amount? And I think it's through this idea of collaboration where students are active in helping other students move forward.
And so, Meera, that was quite interesting, and I understand your point about collaboration. If we look at what's happening during the pandemic in particular, and of course we can talk about the negatives and all the stress and all the tension and that kind of thing. In your viewpoint, does the pandemic throw up opportunity to reframe girls' education? If so, what is it?
Absolutely. I think that any constriction is a frame that forces greater focus, and this pandemic is one of them. One of the things at our school that we've been very fortunate is that we work very hard to think through the question of how do we keep our girls safe and stay open. And because of creating a community culture, and I think that notion of community is central, we were able to understand that we all hold one another's welfare in the palm of our hands. And because of the efforts of the community, and I'm talking about our students, I'm talking about our faculty and staff, I'm talking about our parent families, because of all of the understanding of this, we haven't had a single case of COVID among adults or students, and we've stayed open the entire year since September. And so, part of that is luck, and part of that I think is also girls understanding that this is an area where we all need to cooperate. So I think that allowed the group community feeling to prevail. And I'm astonished, one of the pleasures of looking at a girls' school is girls get it. And so when we think about things like discipline, I probably spend this much of my time on discipline as opposed to most schools. The key is, are we stimulating our girls enough? Are we giving them enough opportunity? That's the challenge. And so I think one of the things we realize is that we don't need to keep girls busy. The assumption that they'll get into trouble, I don't think I have that sense at all. The key is, are we giving them that leisure to be able to think and create, whether they're programming a robot, whether they're writing their first novel, composing a sonata, whatever it might be, solving a mathematical theorem. That is what we want our girls to be doing.
So we have watching and some comments that have come in. I want to encourage all of you who are watching online at the moment to tell us, in terms of, try to answer this question as well, because many of you are prolific in what you do, which is, what superpowers do girls need? So I have in the comments over here, a friend of mine, someone I admire greatly, Marit from Finland, who was once in the top 10 of the Global Teacher Prize. Girls learn better math in cooperation, right? And you have other friends, Ranjana from India, who is a country ambassador for T4. You have Bushra, who says, agreed, Miraji, charismatic teachers are real fuel. You have Shamal from Iraq just saying good evening. We have Ibrahim from Sierra Leone, who says happy Women's Day. You have Murad saying happy Women's Day. Temetope from Nigeria saying nice one. And Duha wishing you from Tunisia. And so we have people watching from all over the world, which is an incredible opportunity that the pandemic has provided. They're saying that so many people are now online. But, and again, we're having some more. So Irma has said greetings from Albania. Meera, what is it that, when you think about your vision for girls' education going forward, what is it? So we've talked about girls as individuals and what we need to develop them. But, you run a fantastic school, private school, an independent school for girls in America. What do you see, what is your vision for girls' education going forward?
Absolutely. We are embarking on a program called the Walker's Capabilities Approach, derived from the thinking of the eminent Nobel laureate economist philosopher Amartya Sen, who coined the idea of the capabilities approach. And this is about really achieving a state of well-being for whatever group. And it's not simply about allowing or giving the freedom or assuring the rights. It's really about achieving. And so that is what we are embarked upon. And we're looking at a series of how we unite body, mind, heart, and spirit. And body is obvious, mind is obvious. Heart is really about relationship, and spirit is really about inner sort of fiber. And so we have divided a program of capabilities, agencies, fluencies, and discovery. And I'll give one example of each. One of the agencies is being Red Cross certified for first aid and CPR. And every girl who graduates from our school. So it's not just the girls who opt for it, it's that every girl has this. And the way girls achieve these is because they bolster one another. They collaborate. You know, we have that old slogan, no Marine left behind. Our slogan is no girl left behind. And girls come together to help one another over that hurdle. In the fluencies, I think the three most important for girls, apart from knowledge and academics, is really what we think of as rhetorical, we think of digital, and we think of financial. And rhetorical is obviously the ability to speak and write persuasively, compellingly. We can think of the digital, obviously, as the ability actually to write code. And for students in the United States now, it's very difficult to go to college and study a subject in the sciences or social sciences, sometimes even the humanities, and not know how to write code to do your homework. And so we want to make sure our girls have that. And the one I'll focus on really is financial. And here it's important for girls to know about money. And so it's important for them to know personal finance. It's important to understand taxes. And it's important for them to understand investment. And for the last 5 years, we've had a group of girls, once they reach the age of 16, they take the IRS training module for that year's tax exam. And we have 16, 17, 18-year-olds who are professional tax professionals who help lower income families with their tax returns in order to claim their guaranteed income tax credits and refunds. Now, the first year we heard about this, and within a few weeks we had 12 girls certified. And each year since then we've added. And last year, of course, because of COVID, our girls weren't able to go out in the community. But in the previous year, a group of about 35 girls brought back over $300,000 to local families. Now that's what I call real community partnership. And this year, our entire junior class. So what does this tell us? It tells us that because of technology, what used to be reserved for professionals, research being done by professors or graduate schools, then became research done by undergraduates. Now our students at the high school level are engaged in original research, whether it's looking for new antibiotics, whether it's epidemiology. They're no longer studying about, they are doing. And I think that that's the key. And then just one last one in the discoveries, which is really about heart and spirit. Discoveries, I'll mention one, sustenance and sustainability, which is the relationship between the inner landscape of human well-being and the external ecological landscape and the connections between them. And so the idea of an organic farm, of composting, of understanding the notion of balance, of a concept like forest bathing from Japan, these are critical for girls' well-being. And so through this assemblage of agencies, fluencies, and discoveries, every student at Walker's emerge. And the point is not, oh, look at all these capabilities they have. The point is, what does it make them become? And it makes them throw off those gendered mindsets, and it makes them assured that anything they want to learn or pursue, they can.
I'd like you to read this comment, if that's okay.
Sure.
So we have Dr. Margaret Casely-Hayford, who has said, there is a confidence that comes from societal context. For example, men have been trusted historically to be more capable, so boys grow up with more innate confidence. It will take a superpower always to imagine that you're cloaked in that societal trust that imbues you with necessary confidence when you walk into that room or sit at the meeting table. I assume you agree with that.
Oh, I do, but in fact, I think that it can be achieved through schooling. And so one of the interesting, I pointed out that when I was at Brown, I could tell which of my students had that all girls because they exuded that confidence. And I want to be careful about that word confidence. It makes it sound a little bit too self-volitional, as if I can just be confident, all will be well. In fact, it's that groundedness in which one knows that one can aspire to do something. And this is what the capabilities approach is about. It's about emerging with that sense. So for example, I will just point out that though I was 60 years old when I took this job 5 years ago, I immediately decided to learn to ride a horse. Not because I thought I could do it well, but because I wanted to embody that spirit of boldness. And the beauty part is, I can now ride a horse. And so who would have imagined? And that's what I want girls everywhere to understand, that of course they can do this. If we can shed all of that self-doubt and that voice that seems to be in every girl's ear saying, you can't do this, replace it with this notion, of course I can learn to do it. It may take me a little longer, a little quicker than somebody else, but that doesn't matter. I can do this. And so it's the becoming.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And, you know, if the reflection of a school is in its students, here we have at the bottom of the screen someone called Emiliana Vegas, who put us in touch, who was a student of your school. And if that's anything to go by, your school has done a phenomenal job. So, Meera, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope we get a future opportunity to have another discussion, not just about girls' education, but actually about the state of the world and American education in specific, because I know there's a lot of interest in that. And so please accept my thanks for participating in this live stream, and I look forward to a future opportunity. Thank you everyone for joining in, and I look forward to our next conversation whenever that may be. Take care, everyone. Good night.
Thank you. Bye-bye.